Something that seemed small at first, so small that most people on Earth never even heard about it until much later. It started on a quiet night in the deep space listening stations that circle Earth like silent guardians. These stations pick up all kinds of signals floating across the galaxy. Normal transmissions, navigation pings, even old radio waves from civilizations long gone. Most are ignored because they're routine. But this one was different. A single sound broke the calm. A shaking voice, full of fear, full of pain, full of something no one could mistake desperation. It wasn't loud. It wasn't clear. It cracked in the middle, like the speaker was struggling to breathe. But the feeling behind it was unmistakable. Whoever it was, they were begging for help. Not asking politely, not requesting assistance. Begging. On one of the listening stations, a young technician froze when he heard it. The signal was faint and messy, like it had traveled through storms and broken machinery. He checked his systems twice, thinking maybe it was an echo or interference. But the cry came again, shorter this time, almost like the person sending it didn't have the strength to say more. That's when the technician realized he wasn't hearing static. He was hearing someone fighting to stay alive. He immediately reported it to the control team. Within minutes, the room was full of people replaying the audio, trying to clean it up, trying to understand what was happening. The more they listened, the more serious the atmosphere became. This wasn't a drifting emergency beacon picked up by accident. This was a real-time distress call coming from a moving ship, and whoever was inside that ship did not have long. Earth's Space Response Network took over the moment the signal was confirmed. They pushed it through the system so analysts, translators, and navigation experts could work on it at the same time. They tried to decode the words behind the fear-filled voice. The language was unfamiliar, but the emotion behind it needed no translation. Someone out there was terrified. Someone out there thought no one would come, and someone out there was running out of time. The first breakthrough came from a small detail most people wouldn't notice. A specific frequency pattern inside the message revealed that the sender wasn't human. It came from a species rarely seen in human space, a quiet and peaceful group who normally stayed far from conflict. They weren't soldiers. They weren't smugglers. They weren't even explorers. They were simple travelers, normally unnoticed, always harmless. That detail made the analysts pause. Why would a group like that be attacked? Why would they be in such danger? Why did their voice sound like they already knew their end was coming? Earth's stations soon triangulated the source. The signal came from a remote region of space that wasn't covered by any official patrol routes. It was a place many governments avoided, a bit unstable, full of political tension, but not quite dangerous. Enough to spark open war. Still, it wasn't the kind of place where a peaceful refugee transport should be traveling without escort. That raised even more questions. Why were innocent travelers out there? What forced them to take such a risky route? And most importantly, who was chasing them? The Leadership Council of the sector debated whether Earth should interfere. That region wasn't technically under human protection. There were political agreements, jurisdiction rules, and diplomatic boundaries that said humans should stay out of it. Other civilizations watched closely whenever Earth moved ships around, sometimes suspicious, sometimes nervous, sometimes impressed. Because everyone knew, when humanity decided to act, they acted fast, and they acted decisively. So some council members argued they should wait. They insisted Earth couldn't just jump into another region's crisis. Not without permission. Not without knowing all the details. They wanted to follow procedure. They wanted to avoid trouble. They wanted to stay inside the rules. But far from that meeting room, in the analysis center where the distress call kept replaying, no one cared about politics. They listened to the trembling voice over and over again. They heard the fear, the hopelessness. They heard the background noise, the thumping, the shaking metal, the alarms, the shortness of breath. Someone was dying out there, and they didn't have hours to wait for diplomatic clearance. The team studying the signal worked nonstop. They compared sensor readings, analyzed energy signatures, tracked the ship's movement, and realized something chilling. The transport wasn't just damaged. It was being hunted. The energy spikes in the recording matched weapons fire. The broken speech patterns suggested the speaker was injured or choking on smoke. The repeating static bursts hinted at failing systems, maybe even breached sections of the ship. This wasn't piracy like the Council feared. This wasn't some random attack in a quiet corner of space. The more information they collected, the clearer the truth became. This was something deliberate. Someone had chosen that transport as a target. Someone wanted to make an example. Someone wanted the entire region to see what happened when you crossed the wrong people. And the attackers probably assumed no one would come. That assumption was the biggest mistake they made. Inside the response center, one analyst leaned back. In his chair, after studying the data, his voice was calm, but the seriousness behind it landed like a weight on everyone in the room. "They're not just trying to destroy that ship," he said softly. "They want to wipe it out completely. They want its message to disappear." Those words changed everything. The team no longer saw it as a distant problem in a distant region. They saw it as a simple, universal truth. Innocent people were crying for help, and no one else was moving. Earth stepped in, not because of politics, not because of alliances, not because it was their responsibility. They stepped in because that was who they were. When someone begged for help, humans felt it like a pull in their chest. They responded because something in their nature couldn't allow them to sit still. It didn't matter that the cry came from a species humans barely knew. It didn't matter that the region was outside their official reach. It didn't matter that the galaxy might raise questions later. One simple, raw, terrified voice was enough. Humanity activated. The moment the emergency alert reached the rapid response fleet, everything moved at once. Lights flashed, alarms sounded, crew members rushed into position. Engines powered up with a rumble that could be felt in the floor. Command officers took their stations with the kind of calm only experience brings. This wasn't the first time. They had moved for a cry of help, but something in their expressions showed that this one felt different. Back on Earth, technicians adjusted satellite arrays to keep the signal locked. They didn't know how long the ship could keep broadcasting. They didn't know how badly damaged it already was. They didn't know if the speaker was still alive. But they would keep listening until the very last second. Some members of the governing council still argued. They insisted on waiting for authorization from nearby authorities. They said acting now could start diplomatic problems. But those arguments felt small, almost meaningless, compared to the tremble in the voice. That cried out across the stars. In the end, a single fact changed the debate. The distress signal's strength was dropping, fast. That meant the ship was losing power. That meant systems were failing. That meant lives were slipping away. Humans didn't wait after that ships launched. Engines roared. Crews strapped in for a mission they knew would be difficult. They didn't know exactly what waited for them out there, but they didn't need to know. What mattered was simple. Someone had called for help, and humans always answered. As the fleet vanished into FTL, heading toward a lonely corner of space where hope was fading by the second. No one on Earth realized what their decision would become. No one knew this small act of compassion would shake political alliances, frighten enemies, and inspire distant worlds. No one knew that this moment, this single trembling voice, would be remembered across the galaxy. All anyone knew in that moment was one thing. A lone cry of desperation had reached the humans, and the humans were already on their way. The fast-moving chaos inside Earth's rapid response fleet as soon as the call for help was confirmed. The ships were built for moments like this, but even then, there was a special tension in the air. People moved quickly, checking systems, tightening safety straps, and reviewing emergency protocols. They weren't preparing for war. They were preparing for a rescue that might already be too late. Inside one of the lead vessels, the atmosphere was sharp and focused. Crew members double-checked every function: engines, communication links, life support pods, medical gear. No one complained about the rush. No one asked why they were risking so much for strangers. They simply acted because that was what humans did when life was at stake. While the fleet sped forward, the analysis center back on Earth continued to study every second of the weakening distress signal. The recordings showed more damage now than when it first arrived. The static was louder. The voice was softer. At moments, it seemed like the speaker was struggling to stay conscious. In the background, loud crashes shook the ship they were in. It sounded like metal being torn apart. One translator leaned forward, trying to make out the faint words hidden under the noise. The panic wasn't just in the voice. It was in the way the message cut in and out, like something was hitting the ship again and again. Every time the voice returned, it sounded weaker. At the same time, another set of analysts uncovered something else inside the signal. It wasn't just a random cry. There were faint traces of a navigation pattern commonly used by refugee transports. That meant the people on board weren't criminals, smugglers, or fighters. They were running from danger long before the raiders found them, and now they had nowhere left to run. The realization changed everything for the response team. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a race against time for innocent people who had already been through too much. And the attackers were still out there, closing in like predators who wanted to erase every last witness. Back inside the fleet, the jump countdown began. The ship's engines hummed with a deep, rising vibration that filled the entire chamber. Everyone strapped into their seats. The lights dimmed for a moment as power shifted into the FTL systems. A calm voice announced the final seconds before they would leave normal space. As the fleet jumped, the stars outstretched into thin lines of silver light. For a moment, everything felt weightless, like time itself held its breath. Then the jump completed, and the ships shot across the galaxy. Even during FTL travel, the crew stayed busy. Medical officers prepared trauma bays, expecting critical injuries. Engineers reviewed emergency docking plans. Tactical officers checked their weapons' non-lethal settings prioritized. They didn't want to fight, but they were ready for one, if it meant protecting the survivors. Meanwhile, the distress signal continued to weaken. The analysis center tracked the transport ship's movement. It was drifting now, no longer flying with purpose. That could only mean one thing: its engines were failing or already dead. The raiders circling it must have damaged them early in the attack. The drifting path wasn't random, though. It had slow swerves that repeated every few minutes. Someone on the transport was trying to steer manually, even if the controls barely worked. Someone was fighting to keep the ship moving, even as it fell apart around them. That small detail hit the Earth analysts hard. Whoever was inside was trying to stay alive long enough for help to find them. They probably didn't know who received their call. They didn't know if anyone out there even heard them. They were struggling in the dark, injured and terrified, but still trying to hold on. That alone pushed the humans harder. As the fleet crossed more of the void between stars, the lead ship received the latest update from Earth. The distress signal was now so weak that every new message sounded like a whisper being swallowed by distance. One of the engineers frowned deeply when he realized the oxygen levels on the transport were dropping. Air leaks, possibly multiple. That meant time was almost gone. The officer in charge didn't raise his voice or sound dramatic. He simply said, "Increase speed, prioritize arrival over fuel efficiency." And the ships pushed even harder, engines lighting up brighter as they accelerated. But the danger wasn't just mechanical failure. The raiders who attacked the transport were still near it. Earth had identified their energy signatures from the recording fast, aggressive craft with weapons, designed to hit quickly and disappear before authorities arrived. They were known for intimidation tactics. They didn't leave survivors unless it served their purpose. And right now, leaving no witnesses served their purpose perfectly. Everyone on the human fleet understood the risk. They weren't just arriving to help civilians. They were about to enter a situation where hostile forces might attack again. But no one slowed down. No one asked to turn back. The thought simply never crossed their minds. As the fleet got closer to the region, long-range sensors began to pick up faint traces of the attackers. Their ships left sharp energy streaks through the dark signs of quick movement, hunting patterns, circling behavior. And in the middle of all that, the drifting transport, spinning slowly, losing power, almost silent. The fleet officers stared at the readings. The raiders were still there. That confirmed the worst fear. The transport wasn't just damaged. It was being toyed with. The raiders were dragging out the attack, waiting for the ship to shut down completely. The message was clear to the analysts. When the transport finally died, the raiders would destroy every piece of evidence and vanish out. But now, there was something. The raiders hadn't expected humans were coming. As minutes passed, the crew prepared for every possibility. Rescue teams gathered near launch bays with equipment packed. Technicians loaded emergency oxygen tanks, blankets, medical scanners. Navigators monitored the coordinates carefully, planning the safest approach to a situation that was becoming more dangerous by the second. Far ahead, the emergency signal flickered one last time. The voice came through again, but this time it was barely audible. It cracked, faded, returned, and then faded again. Even with advanced audio tools, the message sounded like someone trying to speak through failing breath. No one in the room spoke while listening. By the end of that short recording, one thing was clear. The person sending the message might not last much longer. A quiet tension filled the fleet. Even those who didn't know the full situation could sense the urgency. Everyone felt it. This was more than just a rescue mission. This was about proving that no call for help, no matter how faint, was ever ignored by humans. The officer in charge made the final call. Prepare for immediate engagement on arrival. We're not letting them die out there. The team acknowledged with steady voices, but inside, everyone shared the same feeling. Determination sharpened by emotion. They didn't know who the survivors were. They didn't know how many remained. They didn't know what they would find inside the broken ship. But they knew they couldn't fail them. As the fleet dropped out of FTL, the stars snapped back into view. The dark space ahead looked quiet at first. Too quiet. But the sensors immediately picked up the truth. The drifting transport, the damage glinting faintly on its hull, the broken lights, the leaking atmosphere freezing into tiny crystals around it, and circling around it like hungry shadows were. The raider ships moving in slow, deliberate arcs. No more time remained. The humans had arrived, and they were fully activated now, not because they wanted a fight, but because they refused to let innocent people die while they had the power to. Change it. In that moment, with the raiders turning toward them and the dying ship floating helplessly, the story of this rescue truly began. The exact moment the human fleet drops out of FTL. 1 second they are speeding through distorted space, and the next they are staring at a scene that makes everyone on board fall silent. It is worse than the images, worse than the audio, worse than anything they had imagined during the long ride. The refugee transport is drifting alone, turning slowly like it has no strength left. Parts of its hull are scorched black. One side is dented inward, as if something smashed into it with terrifying force. Broken panels float around it, spinning gently. Every now and then, a spark jumps across a torn piece of metal before fading into the darkness, and around that dying ship, several raider craft patrol in a slow, cruel circle. The raiders move the way predators do, steady, confident, completely unbothered by the screams they caused earlier. They believe no one will disturb them. They believe this region is abandoned. They believe they can take their time, but then the human fleet appears. The raiders stop as if stunned. Their ships freeze for a few seconds, engines burning quietly. As they process the new arrivals, the humans do not open fire. They do not shout threats. They simply arrive, silent and focused, their engines glowing with purpose. Not inside the human ships, the rescue teams stand ready. The moment they see the transport, a heavy feeling sinks into their chests. There is no time to admire the view or study the raider ships. People are dying inside that damaged transport right now. The officer in charge of the lead human vessel speaks through the intercom with a calm, steady voice. He doesn't need to yell. Everyone is already focused. Raider ships detected. Refugee. Transport is losing atmosphere fast. All rescue teams, prepare for boarding the moment we clear the threat. A second later, another voice adds, life signs are weak. Some are fading. That sentence hits everyone like a punch. Weak life signs, fading. It means they aren't just late. They might be minutes away from losing the survivors completely. The human fleet sends a single warning message to the raiders. It's not aggressive. It's not dramatic. It simply says, move away from the civilian transport. We are conducting a rescue. There is a pause. The raiders answer by locking weapons. That one move is enough. The humans don't want conflict, but they will not let a group of heartless attackers decide the fate of innocent people. Tactical officers switch to precision mode aim for engines, weapons, anything that disables without killing. The goal is simple. Stop the raiders and reach the dying ship. Then the raiders fire first. Bright streaks of energy cut through space, aimed directly at the lead human ship. The humans respond instantly, shields humming to life. The bridge vibrates as the hits land, but the ship holds steady. They return fire, but only disabling shots. Every shot is calculated, controlled, clean. The humans aren't trying to destroy anyone. They are simply removing obstacles standing between them and the refugees. One raider ship tries to swing around and strike from behind, but a human escort blocks the path, firing without hesitation. The raider's engine sputters, sparks fly, and the small craft spins off powerless. Another raider tries to hide behind debris, but advanced sensors track it easily. A precise shot takes out its weapons, sending it drifting harmlessly. The last raider hesitates, unsure whether to attack or run. It wasn't expecting humans to arrive. It wasn't expecting them to be this skilled, this calm, this ready. After one more failed attempt to land a hit, the last raider turns and flees into the dark, its small engine glowing as it disappears into nearby dust clouds. And just like that, the threat is gone. But the real fight, the fight to save lives, has only begun. The human fleet immediately moves into rescue formation. The damaged transport looks worse up close. Its outer surface is cracked open in several places. Air leaks out in thin streams. They freeze into tiny crystals. There is no movement inside the ship, only flickering lights and the faint pulse of life signs struggling to survive. A rescue team hurries into the docking area. They secure helmets, check oxygen lines, and carry emergency supplies, stretchers, thermal blankets, portable air tanks, medical injectors, everything they might need. Even though they train for this kind of mission, the tension is obvious in their eyes. No one knows what they'll find inside. Sometimes ships like this become silent tombs by the time help arrives. They pray this won't be one of those times. The docking hatch locks onto the transport with a loud metal clamp. A rush of cold air leaks through. The rescue team raises their masks as the hatch slowly opens. A sharp smell hits the burnt wiring. Smoke and something else. Something that feels like fear trapped in the air. The corridor inside the transport is dark, except for a few flickering lights. The walls are scratched and dented. Wires hang loose from broken panels. There are signs of explosions, small scorch marks where weapons probably hit. The air is thin, almost too thin to breathe without assistance. One rescuer shines a handheld light down the hallway. Anyone alive? He calls out, hoping for an answer, a sound, anything not silence. The team moves carefully deeper into the ship. Their boots crunch on broken glass and shattered screens. Every few steps, the ship shakes slightly, its dying system struggling to stay active. They follow the strongest life sign readings, which lead toward the back of the ship, and they hear something soft, uneven breathing. A rescuer raises his hand for silence. Everyone freezes. They listen again. Yes, someone is breathing. Someone is alive. They rush toward the sound and find a small compartment with the door half broken. Inside, a few survivors huddle together, pale and exhausted. One of them looks up with wide, weak eyes. They have been without proper air for too long. Their clothes are torn, their skin marked by smoke and debris. They look terrified when the rescuers enter, until they notice the humans. Uniforms. One of the survivors whispers something in their own language. The translator device picks it up and converts it into a simple sentence. You came. You actually came. The rescuers don't waste time with speeches. They hand out oxygen masks, wrap blankets around them, and help them to their feet. Some survivors are too weak to stand and have to be carried. One child clings to the arm of a rescuer, like they're holding on to the last piece of safety left in the universe. But the team knows this is only a small group. The life sign scanner shows more people in other parts of the ship, some deeper, some barely hanging on. The rescuers split into smaller groups, moving quickly through the corridors, searching every room, every corner. They find another group trapped behind a fallen beam. With teamwork and quiet encouragement, they lift the debris and pull the survivors out. In another room, they find someone lying unconscious next to a damaged life support unit. They check for breathing faint, but still there. Every time they find someone alive, it pushes them to move faster, stronger, with more determination. The last group they find is the hardest to reach. A section of the ship is sealed by automatic emergency doors. The panel is broken, so they have to cut their way through. The sound echoes loudly, making everyone anxious. Finally, the metal gives way, and the door opens. Inside, several refugees lie on the floor, barely conscious, trying to keep each other warm with what little air they had left. When the rescuers enter, some of them start crying, not out of fear, but out of relief. They thought they were going to die alone in the dark. The rescuers speak softly as they help them. It's okay. You're safe now. We've got you. One of the refugees tries to thank them, but their voice breaks. They simply nod, tears streaming down their face. Outside, the human fleet stays alert in case the raiders return. But the attackers never come back. Maybe they realized they couldn't win against the humans. Maybe they didn't want to face a force that protects life with such intensity. Or maybe they simply panicked once they saw that someone cared enough to intervene. In the end, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the survivors are alive. The rescuers lead the last group out of the ruined ship. They cross the docking bridge, guiding them slowly but steadily into the warm, bright interior of the human vessel. Medical teams wait on the other side, ready to check each person and treat their injuries. Some survivors collapse the moment they reach safety. Others look around in disbelief, like they can't understand how they survived. A few whisper quietly to each other, shocked that strangers from another world came for them when their own neighbors did not. The human crew doesn't ask for thanks. They don't ask for explanations. They simply focus on stabilizing everyone, giving them water, oxygen, warmth, and reassurance. They treat them the same way they would treat their own people. Outside the window, the dead transport floats quietly, its lights finally going out. But inside the human ship, new lights shine. Life has been saved, and the galaxy has just witnessed how far humans will go to answer a cry for help. The tension around the fleet had been rising for hours, but Part 4 began at the moment when everything finally shifted. People across Earth, the colonies, and even deep space stations were awake now, watching every update, every small movement, every message that came through the public channels. Nobody wanted a war, but everyone could feel something brewing, something too big to ignore. On the command deck of Earth's primary flagship, the mood was steady but heavy. Each person stood at their post, focused but not stiff, trying to appear calm even though their hearts beat faster with every alert that flashed across their screens. The crew had grown used to danger, but this situation was different. This was the first time they were surrounded by so many foreign ships at once, ships from different regions of the galaxy, all gathered because of the crisis that started just a few days ago. The foreign fleets had not attacked, but their silence felt like pressure tightening around Earth's people. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted to know who was responsible for the incident that started this mess, and what would happen next. Inside the briefing room, the atmosphere was even thicker. A group of senior officers and analysts sat around a long table, waiting for the latest report. A hologram hovered above the centering image of the foreign fleets, each one marked with colors showing their faction. It looked like a mosaic of possible trouble. The meeting began when the operations chief stepped forward. He looked tired, not because he lacked sleep, but because of what he had learned in the past hour. His voice was steady, but everyone could feel the weight behind it as he spoke. "We finally received the decrypted data from the transport vessel," he said, "and it changes everything." People leaned forward in their seats. The transport vessel had been the center of the problem. It was the reason the rescue ships were fired upon, the reason Earth had been forced to respond, and the reason these foreign fleets appeared around the sector. The chief continued, "The vessel didn't just carry refugees. It carried evidence that someone wanted hidden." He tapped the console, and the hologram changed. It now showed a symbol, something unfamiliar to most of the room, but recognizable to a few. A symbol belonging to a faction known for operating in the shadows, using other groups as cover, pushing conflicts without showing their own hands. They did not expect the transport to survive, he explained. Once it escaped, the attackers panicked. They fired on the rescue convoy to erase the remaining witnesses. That's why Earth reacted so fast. A quiet murmur spread through the room. Everything suddenly made sense, but it didn't make the situation easier. If anything, it raised more questions. If this shadow faction was behind it, why were the foreign fleets surrounding the sector? Were they involved? Or were they manipulated, just like everyone else? The communications officer stood. "We've been receiving coded messages from several captains in the foreign fleets," she said. "Some are asking for direct talks. Others say they came here because they were told Earth was hiding something." She paused, letting her words sink in. They're confused too. Many of them may not know the truth. For a moment, nobody spoke. The entire crisis suddenly felt less like a war and more like a trap set for multiple groups at once. Someone wanted chaos. Someone wanted Fighting, mistrust, and fear. Someone wanted to create a situation where no one would look at the real enemy. The flagship captain finally stood. He looked at the crew around him, people who trusted him, people who believed in Earth's promise to protect both its people and its principles. "We're not here to bring destruction," he said quietly. "We're here to bring clarity. If we handle this right, we might avoid a war altogether." The meeting ended with a unanimous agreement. They had to reveal the truth to the foreign fleets before the situation spiraled. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was reaching them without appearing threatening, without provoking anyone, and without letting the real enemy slip away. When the officers returned to the command deck, the ship's screens showed the foreign fleets reorganizing in the distance. Their formations were tightening, as if preparing for something. It could have been defense. It could have been fear. It could have been something worse. The communications team prepared the open broadcast, adjusting the signal so it could reach every ship. The captain stepped into place, but before he spoke, he took a long breath. He wasn't just addressing military commanders. He was addressing civilizations that knew little about humans. Civilizations taught to fear Earth's advancements. When the channel opened, his voice carried through the void. "This is Earth's fleet. We have not come to threaten you. We have come to share the truth." The transmission played the decrypted evidence, the hidden data logs, the messages intercepted from the Shadow faction, the proof that the attack on the rescue convoy was a deliberate setup. They showed every file clearly, with no manipulation. They held nothing back, because they had nothing to hide. At first, there was silence, and a message came through, but not from the usual speakers. It came from a ship belonging to one of the oldest and most cautious civilizations in the sector, a group known for avoiding conflict unless absolutely necessary. Their representative appeared on screen. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried a sense of new understanding. "We did not know this," he said. "We were told that Earth had acted without reason." Another message came seconds later, this time from a different faction. "We were told the same. Someone sent us false reports." One by one, messages flooded in. Anger, confusion, shock. Nobody liked being used. Nobody liked being dragged into danger without knowing why. The fleets that moments earlier seemed ready for war were suddenly reconsidering everything. But in the midst of this shift, the sensors officer shouted, "Incoming signal unknown source." Everyone turned to the main screen. A new ship appeared on the edge of the sector. It didn't match any registered fleet. Its hull design was strange, built in a way that looked almost like it was layered with cloaking plates. It moved slowly, as if testing the reaction of the surrounding forces. The captain narrowed his eyes. "That's them," he said quietly. "The real instigators." The room tensed. If the Shadow faction showed itself now, it meant one thing they realized. Their plan was failing. The unknown ship began broadcasting on a public channel. The voice that came through was calm, almost too calm, like someone who believed they still had the upper hand. "You are interfering with matters beyond your reach," the voice said. "Stand down." Earth did not respond immediately. The foreign fleets didn't either. Everyone waited, watching, listening, trying to understand the intentions behind that message. The captain finally replied, "We're not standing down. We're exposing the truth." The unknown ship pulsed with energy, its systems powering up. The Shadow faction was cornered now, and cornered enemies rarely behaved predictably. The foreign fleets hesitated, unsure if they should brace for battle or wait. Earth positioned itself forward, not aggressively, but protectively, placing its flagship between the unknown ship and the other fleet's. It was a clear message. If someone was going to attack, they would have to go through Earth first. The unknown ship's voice returned, this time sharper. "You are making a mistake." "No, the captain answered. "We're preventing one." Lights flickered across the unknown ship's hull. Its weapons were charging. The Shadow faction realized its influence was slipping, and now they were preparing to silence everyone in one swift strike. But something unexpected happened. Before the unknown ship could fire, one of the foreign fleets broke formation not to attack Earth, but to form a defensive line beside the flagship. Then another fleet did the same, and another. Within seconds, Earth was no longer standing alone. The Shadow faction saw their plan fall apart right in front of them. The unknown ship froze, and for the first time, the people on the command deck saw something they never expected. A hint of fear in the enemy's movements. The captain spoke calmly, letting the moment settle in. "It's over. You won't be starting your war today." The unknown ship hesitated, then its engines activated. It turned sharply and fled into deep space, disappearing as fast as it had appeared. It wasn't victory. Not yet, but it was a turning point. The foreign fleets didn't leave immediately. They held position, watching Earth, watching each other, trying to process everything they now understood. And slowly, one message after another came through, not threats, not demands, but simple acknowledgments. "We stand corrected. We understand now. We were misled." Earth didn't celebrate. There was still too much work ahead, too many questions, too many unknowns. But for the first time in days, the crew felt the pressure lift just a little. They had stopped a war without firing a single shot. They had revealed the truth, and they had shown the galaxy something important. Humanity doesn't start fights. Humanity protects. Part 4 ended with the fleets slowly separating, not as enemies, but as uncertain neighbors who had just learned how close they came to disaster. And Earth prepared for what came next, because the Shadow faction would return. And everyone knew it. The next morning began with a strange quiet across space, the kind that comes only after something huge has happened. Even though no battle took place, everyone felt as if they had gone through one. The entire galaxy had been one wrong step away from disaster, and people were still trying to understand how close things really came. On Earth's flagship, the crew moved slowly, tired but alert. No one had slept well. Messages from different worlds kept coming, full of questions and requests for information. People wanted clarity, and Earth had become the center of it all. The captain stood near the main window, watching the last of the foreign fleets drift away. They weren't leaving out of fear. They were leaving because they now understood the truth. Many of them had been manipulated by the Shadow faction, just as Earth had suspected. And now that the evidence was shown openly, nobody could deny it. But the real problem remained. The Shadow faction had escaped. That thought stayed in everyone's mind like a quiet warning. When the operations chief entered the deck, he carried another data tablet filled with updates. He looked more rested than before, but the seriousness in his eyes hadn't faded. "We've been analyzing the unknown ship's energy signature," he said. "We think we know which region it came from. It's not close. It's far beyond the borders we normally monitor." The captain didn't turn away from the window. "So they've been watching us all this time." "It seems like it," the chief replied. "And they're careful. They erase their traces, change their codes, hide behind other groups. They don't want anyone to know who they really are." The communications officer joined in. She had been handling the incoming messages for hours, and her voice carried the weight of exhaustion. "Some of the foreign captains want to establish a permanent contact line with us," she said. "They think we might have more information about the Shadow faction." The captain finally turned around. "And do they?" The chief hesitated. "We know enough to be concerned." A silence filled the room. Everyone had the same thought. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something much larger. Later that day, a private meeting took place between Earth's leadership. and the flagship's senior officers. It wasn't a meeting meant for announcements or broadcasting. It was meant for planning, how to protect the galaxy from an enemy that preferred to stay in the dark. A hologram lit up the center of the table, showing the star map. A small red point blinked at the far edge of the chart. That's the region where the energy signature leads, the chief explained. A place known for being uncharted. No trade routes. No colonies. No reason for anyone to be there unless they want to stay hidden. An analyst pointed at the blinking red point. They're operating from there because it gives them freedom. No witnesses. No patrol routes. They can move without anyone noticing. The captain asked the question everyone feared but needed to face. What do they want? There wasn't an easy answer. So the chief answered slowly, carefully. If we look at their actions, they want instability. They want distrust between civilizations. They want to push others into conflict so they can expand their influence quietly. Another officer spoke up. And if we didn't stop them, today, the fleets might have ended up fighting each other without ever knowing who caused it. Everyone knew that was true. The Shadow faction didn't need to win wars openly. They only needed to make others fight. The meeting continued for hours. Plans were drafted, revised, and debated. Some officers wanted to launch a reconnaissance mission immediately. Others said rushing in could fall right into another trap. They all knew the Shadow faction was intelligent, patient, and dangerous. When the meeting ended, nothing felt settled. But there was a sense of direction, now a sense that Earth wasn't facing this alone anymore. The next step came unexpectedly. A transmission arrived from one of the foreign fleets, the same fleet that first stepped forward to stand beside Earth during the confrontation. Their representative requested a private conversation. The captain accepted the call. The foreign representative appeared on screen. His face was calm, but the slight tension in his eyes revealed he was struggling with the same weight Earth was feeling. "We owe your people an apology," he began. "We were too quick to believe the false messages we received." The captain nodded respectfully. "You saw the truth when it mattered. That's what's important." The representative continued, "We want to work together. The Shadow faction is a threat to all of us. If we treat this as a human problem alone, it won't be solved." This was an unexpected offer, but a welcome one. Earth had stood alone for many years in defending its space, but this situation was too big for one world to handle. Accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a sign of wisdom. The conversation continued as both sides discussed possible cooperation. They agreed on shared surveillance, shared intelligence, shared early warning systems. None of it was binding, but it was a start. A new chapter in relations between Earth and the rest of the galaxy. Back on the command deck, the crew was surprised when they learned the updates. People exchanged glances, hopeful but cautious. Change like this didn't happen often. And when it did, it could reshape everything. But amidst this progress, an alert suddenly filled the air. A surveillance probe had detected unusual energy waves in the outer system, too faint to be dangerous, but too structured to be natural. The sensors officer quickly analyzed the data. "It's the same pattern we found from the Shadow faction." "Ship," he said. "It's weak, like a distant echo. But it's there." The captain stood straight. "So they're still watching us. They might be testing our response time," the officer added, "or trying to see if we've lowered our guard." Nobody liked that possibility. The captain made the decision quickly. Increase patrol routes, no aggressive moves. Just enough to show we're alert. Earth had no intention of provoking anything. But they also refused to be caught unaware. As the hours passed, news of the Shadow faction's retreat spread across Earth's networks. People were relieved, but not relaxed. The story wasn't over. If anything, it was reaching the point where the real challenge began. That evening, the captain stood alone on the observation deck. He watched the stars scatter across the black sky, each one holding its own worlds and its own stories. He wondered how many of those stories were touched by the shadow faction without anyone realizing. A soft hum behind him signaled the arrival of the operations chief. "You should rest," the chief said quietly. The captain smiled a little. "You're one to talk." They both chuckled, the tension easing for a moment. "You know," the chief continued, "the foreign representative was right. This isn't just our problem. If the shadow faction tried to start a war here, they might have tried elsewhere." "Two, I agree," the captain said. "Which means if we don't take the lead, nobody will," the chief nodded. "Humanity didn't choose this role, but maybe we're supposed to play it." They both fell silent. Outside the window, the stars remained bright, steady, and distant. The next day brought something unexpected. Message arrived from one of the youngest civilizations in the sector. They had heard about Earth's actions and wanted to send a delegation to discuss cooperation. Another message arrived minutes later from a distant colony seeking assistance with security protocols. And then another from a merchant guild requesting updates on shadow faction activity. One by one, these messages built a new picture of the galaxy. People were scared, but they trusted Earth, not because Earth was powerful, but because Earth had acted with clarity when everyone else was uncertain. They had shown restraint instead of aggression. They had shared the truth openly, and they had stood in front of danger to prevent others from walking blindly into it. That kind of action spreads, and it had begun to spread now. Throughout the day, the crew worked harder than ever. They answered questions, transmitted evidence, coordinated with other fleets, and analyzed new data. It was the kind of work that didn't end with applause or celebration. It was just the beginning of long-term responsibility. But even with all this pressure, something shifted inside the crew, a sense of pride. Not because they won something, but because they did the right thing. Night came again, and the flagship drifted in peaceful silence. Patrol ships glided in steady routes around it. The foreign fleets had gone home, but their departure didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like a promise that they would return if needed. In the closing moments of Part 5, the captain walked through the deck one last time. He saw the crew working with quiet determination, each person doing their part. He stopped near a young technician who was monitoring the long-range scanners. "Everything steady?" the captain asked. "Yes, sir," the technician replied. "Quiet for now." "For now," the captain repeated softly. He placed a hand on the railing and looked out into the vast darkness again. Somewhere out there, the shadow faction was planning, watching, preparing, but so was Earth. And Earth wasn't alone anymore. The captain took a deep breath, calm but fully aware of the road ahead.